we have introduced a new build technology into the code base, which is Gradle. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why we've done this and what the transition looks like and the timeline for actual transition. So, as you probably are aware, we have been using Ant for our build tool up to now, and we have decided to switch from Ant to Gradle. So just a little bit about why we are transitioning, and then what is going to change for developers, how you would transition if you are so inclined, and then what's the timeline. So why the transition? The main reason is that the Ant technology is an old build technology that in particular does not handle dependencies. And as LabKey codebase has grown to be more and more complex with many more dependencies, the management doing this by hand has become much more cumbersome. So Gradle provides the ability, for example, to handle transitive dependencies. You don't have to go find all of the transitive dependencies. It will find those for you. It is a build technology that deals with publishing and reading of artifacts so that not everything has to be built or checked in. And yeah, it retrieves the dependencies as well as allows you to publish them. And because the code base is becoming much more complex, we have more modules to build. It is nice to have a build technology that allows you to target particular parts of the code base to build. So you can build more modules, but in smaller increments, which can help reduce the time spent in building for any one developer. There are shorter targeted build steps, and whereas in Ant you have to sort of write your own up-to-date checks, Gradle does a very good job of hooking into the file system and allow you to code those yourself so that they will be more accurate. So with this new build technology, the players in our build ecosystem are Gradle, TeamCity, and Artifactory. Gradle is the build tool, whereas before we had been using Ant, and that's where we configure all the projects, and it is the executor of all the build logic. So we have written plugins that execute our particular build logic, and that is freely available from the Artifact repository. TeamCity we've been using for a long time. It is our continuous integration server, but it is also the place where artifacts will be built and published to the repository. And the repository that we've chosen is JFrog's Artifactory. It stores the artifacts, for example, the jar files, either the ones that we produce or the ones that we rely on externally, and those can be used for the builders, either TeamCity or individual developers. So what will change? If you have been using Ant, you're typing Ant build, and in the Gradle world you will type Gradle W deploy app. And we have documentation that shows you what the mapping is between some of the most common Ant commands to the corresponding Gradle commands. And then just a list of the various other files and settings that will change. The build XML becomes a build.gradle. Standard modules becomes settings.gradle. Ant, this is one of the main reasons that we decided to transition. There's no versioning of artifacts that you get. You can do that yourself. But in Gradle, that's just a standard thing where you get versioned artifacts, so it's much easier to tell which version of a module that you're using, for example. And in Ant, we've had to use the external jars in our version control system, whereas in Gradle, those are downloaded from the artifact server. And we've also changed the root of the IntelliJ project from being in the server directory to the root of your checkout. So how would you transition? On the command line, you put Gradle W in your path, and then you use Gradle commands and tasks or targets. The IntelliJ project, as I said, you use the project at the root level instead of in the server directory. and use the Gradle window in IntelliJ to dynamically create the IML files. And then build script conversion, whereas before you had the build.xml, now you have a build.gradle. We do have built-in capability to recognize that a project has a build.xml, that there are ant commands to use. So you do not have to convert from the build.xml to the build.gradle, but we have done that for all of the projects that we maintain. And finally, the transition timeline. So in 17.1, we have introduced this into the code base, but it is available only really for early adopters. It may not be stable. Our plugins are still under development, and not all the tasks that were available in our Ant build have been converted. We're also still improving some of the performance and the behavior. For example, the up-to-date checks are still being improved. And our documentation, we have a first version of that out there, but it is still in progress. In the release 17.2 timeline, we will complete the conversion to Gradle, and Ant will be removed from the distribution, and the build.xml files will also be removed for the projects that we maintain. That gives you a brief introduction to our conversion from Ant to Gradle, and you can check out the documentation and the resources that are online.